Benefactor underwriting for this broadcast has been provided by a grant from Republic Bank. The power of red is back. Major underwriting support for this broadcast has been provided by grants from New York Community Bank, M&T Bank, Perfect Building Maintenance, Customers Bank, Collins Building Services, Marks Paneth. Additional underwriting support has been provided by grants from AmTrust Title, Bank of America, Capital One Bank, Douglaston Development Levine Builders, Flushing Bank, Friedman LLP, Handro Properties LLC, Handler Real Estate Organization, Investors Bank, James D. Kuhn Real Estate Institute at Syracuse University, John Catsimatidis Red Apple Group, New Banks, Meridian Capital Group, Ocean First Bank, RPW Group, TD Bank, the One Stop Property Group, and these friends. Wow, here we are in the fall of 2021, the beginning of my 21st season of the Stoller Report, and I'm very happy to have a wonderful group of individuals to discuss the topic of affordable housing in New York City. Population has increased, but has more affordable housing been created? I have the individuals who are responsible for building new affordable housing, and also the man responsible for paying for some of it, lending on that situation. So my guests today include Ken Spielberg, who's the Senior Vice President for Omni New York, Eli Weiss, who's the Principal at Joy Construction, and last but not least, Andrew Warren, Senior Vice President, Community Development Lending for Real Estate at the TD Bank. Okay, Ken, you're the new kid on the block for us. Eli and Andrew have been with me before, so tell me how you see this, because reading some of the rags, they're saying that Omni's been very involved, especially let's talk about the World Trade Center project, let's talk about Jamaica, and let's talk about affordable housing in general.
Sure. Affordable housing has been a very interesting business to be in over the last year and a half with all the changes to the pandemic. We luckily have had some really great opportunities to work on projects such as the World Trade Center, and as well as our Archer Green project out in Jamaica, which is actually just topping out. The industry, I think, is going through some transitions where we are seeing that there's a lot of resource constraints. In New York City, there's going to be a change in administration. We at Omni are looking at trying to find lots of new opportunities. We're continuing to seek new land in the city as well as outside the city throughout the country. We see it as an interesting and cautiously optimistic. We are cautiously optimistic about the future.
Eli, you just went through the Inwood rezoning. Okay, you've worked on, I think it's like the history book, taking many years of process over there. Let's talk about Inwood, and let's talk about how difficult it is to get property that you can build affordable housing, that you can make the payments that it's going to be able to afford the situation.
Sure. So, affordable housing is very difficult. I always tell people it's sort of like trying to lose weight after you're 40 years old. It's easy to talk about, but very difficult to do. And the reason for that is, you're paying for construction, which is blind to the fact that you're building affordable housing. Concrete costs the same for a condominium than it does for an affordable housing project.
You're telling me you use the same amount of concrete? I figured you used less concrete,
No, it's the same amount.
Money somewhere.
It's the same amount. And candidly, the way that you have to save money as you bring that up is actually in the land. And really, that's where you can differentiate yourself. I mean, construction basically is a 3 to 5% window of change of cost depending on the site conditions. So really where you try to, make your bones in a deal is by acquiring the land intelligently. And in New York, rezonings end up being one of the ways that you're able to enhance value and enhance what you're able to build, and thus transferring that value to the end product, which is the affordability for the tenants.
Andrew, you're the man with the money. Why are people getting involved in building affordable housing? What's the benefit? What does TD Bank say why they want to be involved with affordable housing?
TD Bank and any of our peer banks, we have a commitment to the community. We're here in the community. We live in the community. I'm in New York right now. I've been here for the past 18 months, haven't left. These are our neighbors and these are the places that we live. So putting money into the places that we can see every day is important. It's important for who we are and what we do in the city. As for new players, there's certainly new players that come into the market all the time. There's definitely folks that seem to think that affordable, given how challenging it is in the market rate side, is the right space to sort of move into. I will say that, I've said it before, sponsorship comes first. And when you're evaluating a deal, affordable housing in this sector is not the place that rewards people kindly for entering for the wrong reasons. This challenging environment to get anything done in. It's very complicated to put these projects together. They take a long time to put together. And if you're not the right steward for this type of affordable housing, you're probably not the partner that we want at the bank. The city and your lending partners and your investing partners are going to be very careful about choosing who that is to make sure that they're not looking at something that's too rosy or unrealistic, where people's lives and people's homes are at stake. It's definitely something that we look at very carefully.
Since I have alumni of the City of New York employees, Ken and Eli, let's talk about the role of HPD in affordable housing today.
Sure. Until a few years ago, I was the director of mixed income programs over there for new construction. In affordable housing, there's kind of defined groups or populations of incomes. There's low income, which is, it's defined as being below 80% AMI by the federal government, and we all kind of adopt that. AMI is area median income. So 80% of the area median income. Below that is low income. Above that, there's a lot of different terminology, middle income, moderate income. But when we're talking about mixing groups of people, whether they are low income and moderate income or low income and market rate tenants, that's what we're talking about in terms of mixed income. So you can have a lot of different populations within a building, but they become regulated in different ways depending on what they are. And so the programs that I was running over at HPD, they were meant to provide subsidy, which is funded by taxpayer dollars, to fund the gap that is created by the lower rents. If you have to underwrite to lower rents, then you cannot, leverage as much debt from people like Andrew, and therefore you need some extra pot of funds to be able to fund the construction of the building. Which, as Eli has already said, the construction costs don't differ between affordable housing and market rate housing. So there has to be some type of pot of money that provides for that gap, and HPD leverages about $1 billion a year into the New York City market to preserve and to build new housing. And they've been doing such a great job over the last 3 or 4 years under the current administration, producing records amounts of new affordable housing and preserved affordable housing.
Explain to my audience what's the difference between the 130% of area median income. And, I think what has also happened over the years is I think the Housing Connect website has really helped people find apartments much easier than before because people are publicizing it.
Sure. I mean, I actually had a feeling you might ask this question, so I have some numbers here. So apologies if I'm looking across the screen. So low income, as I said before, people below 80% AMI of the area median income, they'll be earning about, for a family of 4, about $95,000 But 130% of the area median income, a family of four, is making $155,000. Now, as we regulate the rents, first we check to verify that the incomes of these people match those numbers, as we've, per our regulatory agreements. And then we set the rents to make sure that they are not paying any more than 30% of their gross income on rent and utilities.
Once somebody wins the lottery, as I say, are they protected for life, or is it like in Long Island, you have to qualify each year to show what your income is?
You do have to income certify every single year, but at the end of the day, you are a rent stabilized tenant. So the burden of a tenant making more money, which, to be candid with you, is really the goal of all of us in the community. Andrew, Ken, I mean, we want to see the housing as a base and a springboard for people to do better. That's really the goal of it all. And so it's not something that's frowned upon. It's actually something that's celebrated. That said, there are regulations that do require making sure that there's enough affordability that the projects never come out of compliance. But that specific tenant who does better is protected for life under the same rent stabilization rules that any rent stabilized tenant is protected by.
So here's the question for the banker. We have a new mayor coming into town. We have a new governor right now. How does the bank and how do you look at the change in administration and its effect on affordable housing?
I think we'll have to see exactly what the plan is, but the last two mayors have come up with pretty impressive housing plans to put, as Ken said, a significant number of units out there, more units than ever done. You talk about rent in the city. It is too expensive in every single borough right now to live if you're below a certain median income. You just can't afford to live here. And if you can add more units to try and stave off just the issues that are facing folks in the city right now with rising rents, stable income, we need to put as much out there. We will certainly partner with the city in any way we possibly can. But I think, given the likely mayor and certainly looking at what they're going to do, we're going to see a lot more housing build. It's going to be a focus of the city. And I hope it is. I hope they really stick with that commitment and try and even up what Mayor de Blasio has done over the past 8 years.
Eli, in addition to affordable housing, you build market rate housing. What's your preference in today's world, affordable or market rate?
Well, I am of the belief that all housing that gets created helps the housing issue in New York. We predominantly, I would say 70 to 75% of my business practice is affordable housing, but we also build luxury rentals. We built hotels, we built community facilities for hospitals. Affordable housing is also economic development and community development. I mean, that's the name of the department that Andrew runs. And so, to me, all development in New York that creates either housing or services is value add for New York. That said, my career and my passion is affordable housing. I spent 3 years in government. I've been doing this for almost 20 years. And I think if you look at the people who are in the affordable housing community, you'll find they've been doing it for a very, very long time. You look at Ron Moelis of L&M or our common good friend, Jeff Levine, once you get into affordable housing, besides the fact that, it is a good business, you sort of do recognize the impact that you're making. And if you own market rate housing and you're building affordable housing, you're realizing you're creating a more holistic city. And so even though the projects may be in two different boroughs, there is some symbiotic relationship between improving the city and making sure that the diversity that we celebrate so much in New York is maintained through providing affordable housing to provide for income diversity. So, for me, my passion is affordable housing. I've been doing this for a long time. Like I said, I know Ken's colleagues from the first deal they did with the city, I think in 2004, Thessalonica, I think was the name of it. And that's almost 20 years ago. So I think that any of us, and, I'll speak for Ken and for Andrew, say that while this is a business and there are a lot of numbers to crunch and rules, it's hard to not let this become a passion when you actually see the end results.
All of you have emphasized the fact that, you have to have land, but we don't have new land being built. So what is the city and how are you trying to relate? Because, Ken, we talk about Jamaica, we talk about Inwood, we talk about the Bronx. even now a little bit in Staten Island, the new rezoning that was approved for the city planning recently over there. How do we find land? Okay. Are we finding land from NYCHA housing like we were before? Are we buying air rights? Are we buying parking garages? Where are we seeing this?
Sure. So, over the last couple of years, the deals that I've worked on were either rezoned, parcels that were transferred from NYCHA on long-term leases. I acquired air rights from NYCHA on certain projects. I mean, the days of, going through listings and buying a site are long gone, in my opinion. That you really are not in a position in today's world where the economics just don't add up between buyer and seller expectations as it relates to affordable housing. So you need to be extremely creative. It's a combination of working with government agencies that control land. It's a combination of entitlements, but you are being just as creative on the land acquisition side than you are in any other part of the development process.
Andrew, here's the banker question. How much skin on the game do you want the developer, Ken or Eli and the others, to have in the deal? How much leverage can someone get and where it is?
We're not asking for an equity contribution from the developer, but we are looking for them to have, guarantees and meaningful ways to stand behind their project, which everybody does. We also look to the city as our partner in these transactions to provide a significant source of gap financing and equity behind our loan. We're regulated, we're limited to how much we can actually put into the project based on what the FDIC, the OCC say we can do. But at the same time, you're limited on your leverage based on what the project can support and how much can be repaid. So from the skin in the game, developers may not have equity or cash equity in the deal post-closing, but they put up significant amount of pre-development funds. They put up significant amount of time and overhead that they carry in these projects. And a good developer and a good sponsor has a pipeline and a reputation at risk that we think adds a lot of value. It's a lot of value add. If they're committed to the business, they're going to stand behind their deal, whether it goes, the right way or the wrong way. And then from a permanent standpoint, these projects are limited, right? We want to see affordable housing built. So there's only so much rent, and there's expenses or expenses. So there's a limit to how much you can actually lend on a permanent basis. And we also look to the investor side too, who is putting up significant dollars, institutional investors who have a lot of skin in the game and a lot of money at risk, that if you guys don't do this right and keep this housing affordable to the right folks, they're going to come after you. And certainly they're going to make sure you're doing the right thing too.
I'm not sure how many people realize how long it takes to get one of these affordable housing projects done. When I was still working at the city 4 or 5 years ago, Eli came in and proposed a project up in Inwood, which I still think you guys haven't even, gotten financing for. And,
thanks for reminding me, Ken.
That's why Eli's hairline has changed.
Exactly.
His beard has gotten a bit wider, but, over the years, you're putting in money, you're putting in a lot of significant pre-development funds that you're carrying. And then, once you get into construction, if you're lucky enough to get into construction, you put up significant guarantees. Effectively, you're having to guarantee the entire cost. As a developer, you're having to guarantee the entire cost of that project until it gets finished. And so, there is a significant amount of risk that comes in on the developer side.
Let's talk about inclusionary housing and its effect on affordable housing.
Sure. So I think about 5 years ago, New York City passed what's known as mandatory inclusionary housing, which basically required, as part of any zoning or rezoning initiative, that any project that was rezoned, whether sponsored privately or publicly, have on-site mandatory inclusionary housing, which means that either 25 or 30% of the project, depending on which income levels you choose, would be reserved permanently for affordable housing. So typically when, a project has a regulatory agreement or a tax abatement and is not part of the mandatory inclusionary program, or as people call it, MIH, those units will be affordable for a period of time, typically the length of the regulatory agreement or the tax abatement. The difference with MIH and why it's so groundbreaking is first, it's that it's mandatory, whereas, prior to the legislative change, the affordability was mostly governed by the choices that the developer would make. Now it's mandatory. It's no longer at the developer's choice. The second thing is those units that become affordable are affordable permanently in perpetuity forever. So what the city was able to do is, in exchange for re-entitling your property and potentially giving you more development rights, they were able to create more affordable housing, but more importantly, keep that affordable housing in perpetuity so that they don't come out of the program. And the thought process behind it is, if I'm giving you more development rights, that's in perpetuity. Why would the affordability be limited?
But here's the question. You don't control the insurance costs. You don't control the improvements that later on, you bring up Jeff Levine and Ron Moelis. 25 years ago, they may have started with the project. Okay, there's wear and tear, the situation. How do you maintain this property if your set rent is so low at a certain level, the affordable rent level over there? And that's also a question for Andrew, how he's going to be happy to protect the property that he's lent money on.
I think from a lender's perspective, you're looking at what Eli and Ken said. I like income diversification in a building. I like the cross subsidization between higher AMI levels, even market rate units, because then you can actually do something with the project. You look at something 30 years ago, everything was affordable, but the situation in the city was completely different. So when you're investing in neighborhoods 30 years ago, the only thing you could get built was probably an affordable project. I mean, even 10, 15 years ago, if you went to the Bronx, all you saw were affordable projects getting built. And now you're seeing market rate as well. There's good and bad to a lot of that. But if you've got that diversification, you've got the cross subsidy within a building, then even if you're adding those perpetual affordable units, which can benefit from the market rate side in some ways, then there is a way to continue to maintain that affordability while continuing to operate the building and maintain that building, and at some point recapitalize it.
You bring up the Bronx. I think a good example is Jamaica. Look at the number of units that have been created in Jamaica over the last 10 to 15 years. And look at the number of properties that have been done in, the Bronx. Those are the major areas. I think for my audience, it would be great if you could explain the affordable housing in the new 5 World Trade Center in Lower Manhattan. Ken?
Well, that is a tricky subject currently. It's definitely being hotly debated in the community right now. But, we are part of Omni New York is part of a team with the Bar Development and Silverstein Properties and Brookfield Properties to build World Trade Center 5. It is, predominantly a market rate building, and it is a tricky project because of where it is and the type of building that it's going to be. If you think about where or what type of affordable housing has been built to date in New York City, we are only just now seeing 20-story buildings. Most of the time it had been 10-story or 5-story buildings, low-rise, mid-rise construction. But now we're talking about World Trade Center 5, which is 90 stories. The cost of construction is in a completely different universe than what would be typical for affordable housing. So, there's push from the community to be, going as far as 100% affordable in this type of building. We are trying to, walk the fine line between providing as much affordable housing as we can while still not using the entire resources that are allocated in a given year to the city and state of New York, which if we were to build 100% affordable housing, it would take all of those resources.
A good example of a great project was what happened in Long Island City on the waterfront. Okay, the combination over there of the different levels of affordability, I think they went over 130%, maybe to 150, which created such a large number of apartments for every level of the people who work in the city. Where do you see the 5 years from now? Where's affordable housing? What do you see happening in the future? Eli, since you're the guy who brought most of the people here, give me your opinion.
I think one of the areas that New York City is going to focus on for the next 5 years is revitalizing and preserving and leveraging NYCHA as an engine for affordable housing. And first of all, we have almost a city within a city living in housing conditions that I think all of us would agree need to be improved significantly. So I think there's going to be an investment and short-term privatization through the RAD program of NYCHA properties. Second of all, I think there's going to be a hard look to continue to look at underutilized air rights and underutilized parcels within NYCHA's portfolio to create new affordable housing and use revenue from said projects to help fund NYCHA's revitalization. And then I think finally, the next thing that's going to really have to happen in affordable housing is we're going to have to look at the sort of implications of COVID and what that means in 3 to 5 years from now in terms of office space, in terms of hotels. I think, it's a bit early to sort of see what shifts will ultimately occur. But this was a monumental event in New York. And, I think it would be naive to say that there won't be changes to behavior in terms of office workers, in terms of business travel. I don't know what they are yet, but there will be changes. Hopefully they won't be negative. And perhaps that creates an opportunity to, repurpose properties for affordable housing.
I'd like to thank the three of you for the celebration to be with me on the beginning of the 21st season. I'd like to thank Ken, who's our rookie over here, Eli, who's, the veteran, and Andrew, who's our friend, who's been with us before, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.